Well, again, I'd like to just thank everybody for attending today. I really appreciate your time. This presentation is only allotted for 30 minutes. It does take quite a bit longer to go through each of the features that we've added to our 2017 2.0 release of Estimator. So I'm going to try to keep this at a very high level today, but I am open to at any time working with you to answer questions after this, or to maybe even scheduling follow-up meetings with some of our staff just to show you more in depth each of the features that I covered today. In 2017 2.0, this is a high level of our release schedule for Estimator. In 2017 2.0, we initially were going to make this a very large release aiming at 2D and 3D quantity takeoff. What we decided to do was break that release into a series of releases to get the functionality into our clients' hands much faster and try to provide value as quickly as possible. So this release has been broken up. This is our first delivery of, I think, delivery 3 this year. So one thing to expect is about 7 to 8 weeks after this release, we'll be issuing a 2017 3.0 release as well. For 2017 2.0, we have 3 major categories of features that we've implemented. High level, it's just general enhancements to our estimate. It's 2D takeoff improvements, and it's much better support for self-performed contractors. So that's going to be the way that I walk through it today. Again, I'm going to try to keep it high level. And without further ado, let me jump into it and just show you some of the major points for 2017 2.0 Estimator. Starting off with our estimate improvements, one of the things that we've done, and you can see here I just opened up a sample estimate just to have something to talk to. One of the things that we've done is we've given the ability to bulk add costs to an estimate. So this is just in support of a different workflow. We found that estimators work a lot of different ways. This is one of the enhancements that did come from our industry advisory board. So the way that you would do that in Estimator is you would go to our preferences, and this preference has always been there, but one of the things that this does is it now has a number of enhancements on top of it. So we have this ability to prompt for line item quantity and prompt for assembly quantity. These are checked by default, but if you uncheck these, that puts the application, that puts Estimator into a bulk add cost mode. So when I add costs, for example, if I add line items, our takeoff window looks a bit different. So you have this staging area that shows up now. And you also have the ability to go and add a number of cost items extremely quickly. So I could bulk select cost items, add it to a staging area, maybe come through here, add a handful more, add it to my staging area. And then with the cost here, I cannot edit the prices, a unit of measure, a description, anything at this point. But what I can do is find some of the pieces that I may not want to add. So if I selected all of these things and added them, but I really didn't want these columns, I can unstage them before adding. And then once I'm happy with the items that I want to add to my estimate, I can click Add Line Items. And before those items are added to the estimate, one of the things that showed up in our 2017 1.0 release was the ability to have these kind of sticky WBS properties. So these are the things that you can force the estimators to answer questions based off of, typically where do you want to place these costs in your estimate. So in this case, I've just got the system, I can put all these in building 1. And so now all those line items I just added were in building 1. Similarly, I can go to Add Assembly and do the exact same type of functionality here. So if I wanted to, say, add maybe a slab above grade and a slab below grade, I can multi-select, stage both these assemblies, and you'll notice that this looks a little bit different. So unlike the line items, this shows you at the assembly level, but I do have the ability to expand this and see which items are going to be added to my estimate. Now, I can't come in here and remove items from the assembly, but I can remove assemblies. So here I can stage as many assemblies as I'd like, click Add. Again, I'm prompted. Maybe I don't want these to go to building 1. Maybe I want these to go to, in this case, parking garage. So I'm just going to add parking garage to the list. So by typing a value in, just like before, it adds that value to the list of values for my system. And now I'll have that in my drop-down list for every future takeoff I do. So here I've just added 2 assemblies and a handful of line items to my estimate. Now I'm going to hit undo just to back these off, because one of the things I want to show is comparison. I don't want to skew the comparison too much. I'm going to back these two things off. All right, so now we've removed those line items and assemblies just by hitting Control-Z. One thing to note is each time you go and you add a series of takeoff, even though I added maybe 100 line items to the estimate, the add is done in a bulk operation. And so by undoing, you have the ability to bulk undo as well if you like. One of the other things at the estimate improvement level that we've done is the ability to reorder comparisons. Again, this is something that came from our industry advisory board. This came from our user base. So what that looks like is in Estimator, you always have the ability to compare an unlimited number of estimates side by side. For those of you who are familiar with our application, you notice that this looks a little bit different than before. I will say there's a whole bunch of 24 different feature sets in Estimator 2017.2.0, and I'm probably only going to show you, out of those feature sets, maybe a third or less of the actual total amount of features. So again, I'm just skimming the top here. But you will see things as I go through this that you might notice are a little bit different. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a handful of other estimates to compare. It'll bring those estimates in. And like typical, you want to go and you look at the comparison for WBS properties, for example. You can see that comparison. So this is not new functionality. This is the same as before. But the reason why I'm showing you this is just so you can see, kind of get an idea of what the graph looks like, comparing the original baseline estimate against the two alternates that we had before. Now, if I go back to my estimates, I have the ability to drag these and move them around. And now that will change the order with which I'm comparing these estimates, which is great for high level, also really handy for the detailed level. One of the pieces of functionality that I just demoed but didn't bring attention to is the fact that now by default, the detailed level comparison is automatically configured based off of how you were viewing it at the summary level. So you may notice I switched to CSI level 1, and when I drill down, you're now seeing that breakdown by CSI level 1 in the detail. So there are a number of additional pieces of functionality like that that I'm probably not going to bring attention to today, but when we release, of course, we'll have that full list available. Another thing to show, and this is going to get a little bit into the 2D takeoff now, is we have a whole bunch of new functionality around 2D takeoff, and this is just our first step toward implementing the larger feature set, which will be complete by the end of the year, early next year. So what I'm going to do here is I want to open just a simple floor plan. And right off the bat, you might notice a couple of things if you are a user of our technology. But first, before I address the takeoff palette, which is probably the biggest change, one of the things that was a very high demand item was the ability to set the scale by picking a drop down. So I no longer have to draw the scale. I can just select from a drop down list. Of course, you still have the ability to draw scale if the scale is not provided, or if that's just the way you prefer to work. Another piece for our 2D enhancements was the cleaning up of this ribbon. So this ribbon had probably 40% more commands that were available on it in the previous version that we were able to actually remove. Even though we didn't remove the functionality per se, we were able to consolidate and make the user interface much easier to use and learn. We also removed the takeoff palette, which used to show up on our ribbon here, and now that is fixed inside of our takeoff window. So not only is the location different, but a handful of pieces of functionality are also different. For example, I can come in, and as soon as I select on an item in my takeoff palette, I'm now sketching that item for takeoff. So all I'm going to do here is just add a handful of takeoff items. Do some ceramic tile. And maybe even come in and add some exterior walls. And all I want to do here is not necessarily to showcase the fact that we can do takeoff. But what I want to do is showcase another piece of functionality that kind of requires, or at least helps if I have a large number of takeoff items present. Before I jump over to that, though, while we're still looking at our 2D drawing as a whole, I want to bring attention to another piece of functionality that we do have. And this is really more around helping the estimator better understand and visualize what has been taken off. So one of the other pieces of functionality that we've added is the ability to remove the color from the drawings themselves, just in case a lot of the 2D drawings or PDFs you might have may already have a lot of color or hash patterns that are interfering with your ability to determine what is my takeoff versus what's already on the drawing. You'll notice here that the title blocks have some color on them. If I go over to our new menu item here, I can now select black and white, which will then render everything in black and white. Or if it's still too busy, I can say just turn off the background imaging and just show my takeoff. One of the other pieces that we've done is the ability to apply a takeoff item. So, for example, I didn't draw any stone flooring. Let me zoom in a little bit here. But if I select stone flooring, and I hit apply takeoff item, I can now paint these items. So you have the ability to quickly change what you've drawn to another type of takeoff item. Also, while sketching, we gave the ability to auto pan as the cursor gets closer to the edge of the drawing. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit and show you our next piece. We've also provided the ability to do reports from our takeoff. And that has a number of different pieces of functionality. For example, we can show a legend, which you can move around and place anywhere on the drawing. You can reconfigure and resize the legend. And that legend will show you everything that's visible currently on the sheet. So, for example, if I were to just move these items off the view, you'll notice the legend quantities and contents both change to show you only those things that you're currently seeing. We do have a handful of options currently available, which include things like showing partial components, which I'm showing here. If I were to uncheck this, you notice the brick goes away because the brick takeoff is only partially shown here. You can do things like color the transparency, border color, format this in a way that matches your branding and looks good with the drawing as well. You can also turn on and off the quantities if you'd like so that you don't show those. So if you wanted to provide that to your clients or to your subcontractors to show the takeoff, but you don't want to give them your quantities, you do have that capability as well. All right. We also have the ability to print, of course, so you can now come through here and print. That will automatically bring up your print dialog, and you can send that to a printer, or you can hit this drop down and do a print preview. And the print preview gives you a number of different options. So, of course, it gives you a preview of what the printout's going to look like. But it also gives you the ability to send this in a number of different formats. So you can export this as PDF or even HTML, send it to Excel or Word. There's a handful of different formats that we support, so you can send this to a number of different formats. All right. And that right there will pretty much wrap up most of the larger pieces of 2D functionality that we've done for 2D takeoff. It is by no means the exhaustive list of things we're working on. This is just our first step in the direction that we wanted to finish by the end of the year. So one of the things to look out for in future releases will be an entire document management system, things like OCR, a handful of even nicer integrations with our takeoff summary and the takeoff palette as a whole. Now what I'd like to do is move over to the section of features around rates and resources. So this is going to be that section that addresses interacting with self-perform contractors, or if you have a self-perform estimate and you really need to figure out what kind of crews you have, any of the resources you have on a particular job, rate tables, anybody who might use that and you need to refine that in your estimate. We've created an entirely new view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to my estimate, and then I'm going to bring up our rates and resources view. So this view is a new view This view shows you all of the rates, resource groups. So you might think of resource groups as crews, or material lists or groups, and then of course the resources in those resource groups, along with all of the markups and quantity of resources that are in that crew. So the rates and resources view has two different ways that you can look at it, two different ways you can view the view, so to speak. Currently I'm in our resource view, but I can also click on the rates view. And this allows me to interact with the rate tables currently applied to my estimate. So I'm going to jump back over to resources. And one of the things I wanted to highlight was that this view, like our estimate view, is affected also by our filter. So the filter view allows you to configure and view your estimate based off of any breakdown you'd like. Currently I'm viewing it by CSI level 1 and 2. So if I click here, it's going to show me everything to my GRs, our site construction, our concrete, and you can see that filtering here. But you can also see it filtering my resources down below. Now, one of the things you have the ability to do, just like when we configure the filter view for our estimate, we also can configure the filter view for our rates and resources. So one of the things I might do, in fact, I'm going to close this, I've already got one saved, is just break this down by first rate table and then resource groups. So now I can say, show me all of the cost items in my estimate that are assigned to my Texas rate table. And what crews specifically are in there. So in this case, I've got a crew assigned to a Texas rate table. It's a concrete crew. But if I open up my default, I can also see the concrete crew for my default rate table, the masonry crew, and painting crews. So now it's just showing you each of the cost items that are associated with those crews. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to switch my layout here to a labor and resource view just to bring in some additional data that's pertinent when thinking about working with your resource groups and resources. So again, you can see here, this is my painting crew. One of the things that we have exposed, and again, there's a number of different pieces of functionality here. One of the things that we've exposed is the ability to change or set the resource group associated with a line item directly inside the estimate. So I can come in here and pick from an existing set of resource groups and add that. Now, one of the things you can do, aside from picking from an existing set, now that set happens to be populated from my currently connected database, but I also may want to create a crew on the fly. And all I have to do that is to jump down to my rates and resources view, click either add resource group if I don't want to create one from scratch, or I can say copy and pick from an existing copy. In this case, it's just going to go from my select row here, which is a concrete crew. It's going to say, okay, you're going to have a copy of your concrete crew, give it a name. Here just so happen to be the existing resources associated with that resource group or that concrete crew. And then you give it a rate table. So for example, if I wanted to put this in St. Louis, and then I wanted to, we'll keep this the same, we're going to call this concrete crew, you know, St. Louis, simple concrete crew, hit OK. You'll see a couple things happen here. So you see that my St. Louis crew has been added to my resource group, and you'll see that that concrete crew that I've created is associated with that. I can now come through and make additional changes to this crew if I wanted to, changing the quantity of the individual resources. I also can switch over to my rate tables and set specific markups on that St. Louis crew for any of the resource groups assigned to those resources. One of the things as well that we've done that was not in our previous versions is we've also opened up how a rate table can affect your estimate. So in 2017 1.0, you had to create a resource group, associate that resource group with a line item, then tie that resource group to a rate table in order for the rate table's markups to affect it. So for example, if I wanted to put 8 1/4 sales tax on all material, I have to create a resource group, tie it to all line items that represent a material, and then associate it with that rate table in order for that sales tax to take effect. Now, in 2017 2.0 and beyond, the rate tables affect all cost items. So every single cost item associated with default, whether or not it has a resource group or not, doesn't matter, will have the ability to have these markups affected. The reason why we have one called default is that every single cost item is always associated with a resource group. So if you didn't give it one already, then it's going to be associated with your default. And that doesn't really necessarily do anything for your estimate unless you want to come in here and give it values for the markups or tie resource groups to that rate table. You have the ability as well to add or remove markups or even modify the markup values directly within your estimate. So one thing to note is all the changes that I've been doing inside of my rates and resources view will certainly affect my current estimate. For example, if I quickly filter on the concrete crew, again, you'll notice that it filters the rates and resources as well, so I can quickly drill down and only interact with the one crew that I'm currently concerned with. If I come in and I want to change the union dues, for example, I might say, well, this is going to be $1.75. Now, before I complete that, I just want to bring your attention to my labor cost. As soon as I tab out of that, you're going to see the labor cost is going to change. So all of my productivity labor costs is going to go up. Now, it probably wasn't a big jump, so you're not going to see a whole lot happen there. But any change I make here is going to have large effect on my estimate, because that's going to affect every single cost item that's referencing, if I can speak today, this resource group. So any change you make here to any of the markups or the base rates or the quantity of people on this crew are going to directly affect all items referencing it. And if I want to make changes so that I don't want to have a handful of line items affected by this, I can easily multi-select, hit modify, and I can change bulk the resource groups or rate tables that are associated with the pricing for this item. One of the other things that we also provided, aside from being able to change the resource group associated with a cost item, is the ability to change the productivity on the fly. So in this case, you're doing 20 linear feet, but that may be 25. You can change, of course, high level the labor cost. This right now is being derived from the crew, so if I change this, it's going to disassociate from the crew, so I'm going to leave that alone. We also exposed not just the crew duration, so the crew hours, but also all of the man hours on that crew. So this is what we might have shown before, would be the labor duration. Currently, I've got it represented in days, but also now you can see the total man hours on that crew for the concrete being applied. At a extremely high level, that would be most of the large-scale pieces of function.
Thank you, Mike, very much. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to go ahead and type those in. I do want to ask, Mike, you mentioned the Industry Advisory Board a few times. Could you maybe tell people on the line that don't know what that is?
Yeah. So for Beck Technology, we have a group of companies and people within those companies who represent what we call our Industry Advisory Board. This is just a group of people who may or may not be existing clients or users of our technology, who are just passionate about pre-construction software, passionate about estimating software, or we have other products, so they might just be really passionate about that kind of tech and want to see it improve and just to contribute in any way they can to helping out their fellow estimators or pre-construction team members. So what we do is we find these people who have passions in a particular area, and if they want to contribute, what we do is we have a series of programs where we can reach out and interact with these people. Some like to get extremely early versions of our functionality, so they'll work with our dev teams from the storyboard all the way to testing. Some of them just have really great ideas, want to give us those ideas and say, hey, let me know when you guys create this thing. So they have very limited engagement, but they have great ideas. It really depends on your level of involvement. We have customer engagement people on our team that work with those Industry Advisory Board members to make sure that the tech not only has sets of features, but the way that those features behave, when they're implemented and how they're implemented, work with those organizations' technology roadmap plans. So oftentimes we'll interact with clients who are at point A and they want to get to point B in the pre-construction team, and we've got guys on our end who will help map that out and then work with us and in an Industry Advisory Board to make sure that the product will address their kind of strategic goals.
Perfect. We'll go ahead and wrap up this presentation, and we will definitely keep you all informed of our next webinar. Thank you, Mike.